New Technology and Inventions. By the 1860s, many of the factors necessary for the rapid industrialization of the United States were already in place. Machines had taken over much of the work once done by hand. Work had moved from homes to factories. Railroads had begun to connect customers and manufacturers with an efficient transportation system. After the Civil War, new inventions and improved technology prompted the growth of new industries. Some of these innovations, or new ideas, helped businesses to grow and become more efficient. Others made daily life easier for many Americans. The Age of Steel. Before the Civil War, the nation's railroads ran on iron rails that wore out quickly. Railroad owners knew that rails made of steel, a mixture of iron, carbon, and sometimes other metals, were stronger and would last longer. Steel, however, was difficult and costly to make. In 1872, a Scottish immigrant named Andrew Carnegie went to England to study a less expensive method of making steel, a method invented by Henry Bessemer. Carnegie owned a company that made iron bridges for railroads. He knew that his bridges would be better if they were made of steel. Carnegie was so impressed by the Bessemer process that he brought it back to the United States. "The day of iron is past," he announced. "Steel is king." Carnegie was right. Within a decade, steel was replacing iron in rails, locomotives, and bridges. Other industries took advantage of steel, which was less expensive than iron. Steel nails, needles, and knives became common household items. Many steel companies competed fiercely to supply steel for such products. To remain the leader, Carnegie hired scientists to improve the quality of his company's steel. He employed good managers to make his steel mill run efficiently. His recipe for success was to adopt every improvement, have the best machinery, and know the most. To keep costs low, Carnegie set out to control every step in the steel-making process. He purchased iron mines to supply his iron ore, coal fields to fire his furnaces, and railroads to ship his finished steel to the customers. To reduce his competition, Carnegie also bought up several rival steel companies. He then combined them all to form the giant Carnegie Steel Company. By 1900, Carnegie Steel produced a quarter of the nation's steel. Here's a video about the Bessemer process. Electric power. In 1876, Thomas Edison opened an invention factory in New Jersey. With a team of workers, he set out to create a minor invention every 10 days and a major one every 6 months or so. Edison succeeded brilliantly. More than any other inventor, he helped turn electricity into an everyday source of light and power. His workshop turned out the first practical electric light bulb, the phonograph, which is a record player, the motion picture projector, and many other inventions. In 1882, Edison built the first electrical power station and distribution system in New York City. His team invented everything the system required, including generators, regulators, meters, switches, light boxes, fuse boxes, and underground electric cables. When he finally turned the generator on, electricity began to flow to homes, stores, and factories. The age of electricity had begun. By 1900, some 25 million light bulbs were glowing across the country. Many factories were replacing water wheels and steam engines with electric motors. Streetcars, powered by electricity, carried workers and shoppers along city streets. New electric-powered devices, such as washing machines and vacuum cleaners, were making housework easier. Here's a video about Thomas Edison. The telephone. The telephone was invented by a Scottish immigrant, Alexander Graham Bell. In 1876, he was getting ready to test his talking machine. Bell spilled acid on himself. "Watson, come here, I want to see you," he commanded his assistant. Thomas Watson, who was in another room, heard every word over Bell's telephone. this claim is disputed. Check the video below for the true story. Bell's invention worked so well that by 1915, Americans were communicating with one another over 9 million telephones. All these telephones made American industry more efficient and competitive by allowing producers, sellers, and customers to communicate quickly and easily. Here's an Alexander Graham Bell biography video, and a longer video. The first 2 minutes are good. New production methods. New methods of organizing work were also making businesses more efficient. Factory owners adopted Eli Whitney's idea of assembling a wide variety of products from interchangeable parts. They also used the assembly line. In a shoe factory, for example, one worker operated a heel cutting machine. Another operated a sole cutting machine. Another made shoelaces. And still other workers assembled, labeled, and packaged the shoes. Henry Ford was one person who foresaw the great potential in the assembly line. Ford created a moving assembly line to mass-produce automobiles. In Ford plants, workers stood in place all day, while a conveyor brought the work to them. After each worker did 1 or 2 tasks, the belt moved the product to the next worker's station. These techniques of mass production, which is the use of interchangeable parts and assembly lines to make large quantities of identical goods, these techniques of mass production enabled workers to produce more goods per day at a lower cost. As prices dropped, more Americans could afford to buy manufactured products. More customers meant more factories. By 1900, almost 4 times as many Americans worked in factories as had a generation earlier. Here's a good video on Henry Ford's mass production. Air transport. While Henry Ford was turning out cars on the assembly line, brothers Orville and Wilbur Wright were experimenting with flying. In 1903, with his brother Wilbur running alongside, Orville successfully piloted the first flying machine in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Although the flight was only 12 seconds in duration, it sparked worldwide interest in flying. By the late 1920s, an industry based on air travel had emerged. The U.S. Postal Service used planes to transport mail across the country, while the military used planes for exploration and scouting. At the same time, wealthy Americans took their first commercial flights across the country. Here's a short video on the Wright brothers. There's an image of the Wright brothers, and the source of this is TCI History Alive. And here's some other cool videos recorded using an invention by Thomas Edison's motion picture recorders. And there's 4 video links there.